I guess I better start by unmuting myself. That might help. So, thank you, Ellie, for the introduction, and it's just great to be here and be part of Herstory. I am Janine Felton. I'm a 54-year-old woman living in Auckland, born and bred. I am a Kiwi, and yeah, I have a story to tell you today. And it may resonate with some, but it may just help you think about your own journey and what level of actual freedom you have to make your own choices and to make your own way. So in my 40s, there was this underlying kind of feeling that, and this constant question of, is this it? You know, like, is this all there is to life? Like, what is it all about? You know, I'd lived by this kind of driving statement. I'm a strong, independent woman. And what I found myself doing was divorcing my husband of 20 years. And by the end of my 40s, I had 2 grown children, 2 grown daughters. And I was really wondering what more there was for me. I was a CEO of a not-for-profit organisation, but there was this kind of discomfort, disease within me that I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Then I turned 50, and if any of you ladies have turned 50, you'll understand my experience. I think it's pretty much like a 99 percentile experience. Most women that I speak to that have turned 50 have said it's quite a turning point. It is a point of going, not really caring what other people think anymore. I'm going to make my choices. This is it. Off I go. But underneath it all, I just had this really amazing feeling that something really profound was going to happen in my life that coming year. And I am an intuitive, so it's kind of like, okay, what is it? I don't know, but let's just get on with it. So I did, and I turned 50, and I celebrated with family and friends, and really lived with this wonderment of there's something coming. I'm not quite sure, but there's something coming. Now, it was only a few months later, and I was in Brisbane, Australia, with work, and I stayed a couple of days with my cousin, and she said, Janine, you're not going to believe who I've got in contact with. And I said, no, who? And she goes, Teresa, T. And I went, oh my God, really? And she goes, yeah, she found me. And my heart raced, is all I can say. My heart raced. And I was overwhelmed with emotion, and I could barely speak. And the next thing, there she is, FaceTimed. We'll bring her now. We'll talk to her now. So we FaceTimed her, and there was the woman I fell in love with when I was in my early 20s, face to face, 28 years later. And I was astounded at the level of emotion. I was astounded at how I, as an individual person, at someone who thought they were a strong, independent person who really knew themselves, was so overwhelmed by their own reaction to seeing another human being. And I'd never had that level of emotion attached to somebody else. Everybody, oh, well, I guess my children when they were born, but it wasn't the same. And there she was. And And we spent a long time talking on Facebook. Well, she talked and my cousin talked, and I was speechless, which I can tell you is a very unusual thing for me. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that there she was. And, you know, I was single at the time. And like I said, I'd been married to a man for 20 years. And I had put these emotions and this person completely into the back of my mind, buried her so deep that, you know, I couldn't connect with her until I saw her. And it all flooded back. And what happened as a result of that experience, I mean, we got off the FaceTime and I messaged her immediately and I said to her, it was real, wasn't it? And she said, oh, yes, it was. And I knew that I was still in love with Teresa 28 years later. And you might ask, you know, why weren't you together? What happened? And this started me on a very serious journey to discover the level of conformity I lived by, the lengths I went to in order to make other people happy and to do the right thing. Back in 1989, my sister was killed in a drunk driving crash, and it was around the same time that I was seeing Teresa and developing that relationship and realizing that, you know, this was my person. And I hid it from my mother and she found out. And she said to me, Janine, I'm not having a gay daughter and I want grandchildren. And I was so torn and so in grief that all I could do was ghost Teresa. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't talk to her. I couldn't see her again. I ghosted her. That's the terminology we use today, and that's actually a really good word for what I did. And it broke my heart. It broke Teresa's heart too, and she left shortly after and moved to Canada. And I got on with life. And it wasn't long after that I met a guy in AA, because I'm a sober alcoholic, and we got married shortly after, and then had 2 children. And I buried the idea of loving Teresa and being a lesbian so deep in me that I didn't see it anymore. And I got on with my life. When I reconnected with Teresa, it was like someone turned a switch. It was like all of a sudden I was allowed to be me. And I think because I'd lived enough life by then, you know, I'd done all what was expected of me, you know, the marrying and having kids and becoming a CEO, you know, I'd achieved a lot in my life. There was an opportunity there for me to actually follow my heart. And so I came out at 50. I came out. Teresa likes to say, I leapt out yelling and screaming. I didn't quietly come out. It was like a great, enormous announcement and shouted from rooftops. And it was something that I understood that in me was already percolating, and it was a freedom I just couldn't ever have imagined ever having. The freedom to be me. to embrace a part of me that, you know, really in the big scheme of things is quite significant. And so I leaped out and continued an online relationship with Teresa, who had been living in the States on the East Coast and for a long time. So she left in 1989, and this was now 2017. So this is 28 years later, and she's been in the States for some time, and Canada prior to that. And we started an online relationship, and I was just delighted. I was just delighted. It was extraordinary. But at the same time, you know, my mum was very sick. She was dying. We bought a house together. I was nursing her and running an organisation. Life was a big stretch. And when I came out, it was extraordinary that Mum's reaction was so different. She was fully accepting that, you know, I was in love with Teresa. And over the time, just the next few months, she started to realise just how much there were signs that actually I'd been gay all along. You know, and what I realised was that how much I lived a conformed life. You know, I was a little girl in the 60s, you know, and little girls in the 60s, well, children were seen and not heard, and little girls wore dresses and looked neat and tidy and did things right and didn't speak out of turn. But I was also a highly sensitive child. I was very clever and did really well at school, but there was an element of my personality and my sensitivity that, you know, my dad found really hard to handle. You know, he used to say things like, "Oh, I'll give you something to cry about," which, of course, for a sensitive child is about the worst thing you could ever say. And, you know, there was a lot going on in my home, and I just absorbed everything that was going on around me and learned that really, you know, in order to survive, you got to curb who you are. You got to change who you are. So, yeah, my emotions became my enemy, especially those of the sensitive type. The things that caused me to cry. I remember when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a swimmer, and Dad had trained, you know, two of my aunties in swimming, and I wanted to be a swimmer. But Mum said, no, you'll look like a bloke. You can't be a swimmer. This is not, no. And so I got the message, you can't be a swimmer, you look like a bloke. There were lots of messages about not looking butch, and lots of messages about, you know, doing what was expected. And yet, to meet my mum, she's the most outgoing, kind of colourful person. But I see now that she lived a conformed life too. And there were so many, you know, opportunities for her to be herself, and really she didn't discover them until much later, you know, the type of work she did and things like that. Yeah, I could see the pattern of conformity